Okay, welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals, covering all things South Carolina athletics. I am Alan Cole, as always, not here with Caleb Alexander this week. We've got Perry McCarty instead. Perry, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm living the dream. How you doing, Al?
Doing the same, living the dream. It is week 4. South Carolina is at home against Akron this weekend. A little dip out of SEC play before the first bye week. If you want to we've had stories all week, kind of previewing the game leading up to it, press conferences, all that sort of thing. If you're not subscribed to GamecockScoop.com, you should be. We've got all sorts of stuff. I think the first place to start, as you just kind of start to go into this game, is the health of Lenore's Sellers. Sellers takes a hit on the second to last play of the half against LSU last week. Kind of gets his ankle rolled up. He came into the media room after the game with an ice bag on that ankle. Plays one series second half, tries to give it a go. It just wasn't happening. Dowell Loggins said yesterday that his expectation was just that he would do more in practice today than yesterday. He was not committal on if he would play. We don't get an injury report this week. It's not an SEC game, not an official one anyway. What are your I know we don't know if Lenoris is going to play, but what's your kind of thought, I guess, on A, if he should, and B, if Lenoris does play, what South Carolina should kind of try to do with the offense with him this week?
Yeah, I don't know if his health is worth playing much. I mean, we do have the bye week next week, but it's certainly important to get Robbie Ashford reps because he'll be needed somewhere along in the season. But I will say this about Sellers. He looked really good moving around in the pocket, the best we've seen against LSU. He was excellent at finding those dead areas where the pressure wasn't. Of course, minus the interception and the fumble, but he moved around very well. He looked like a poised quarterback as far as that part of it goes. Robbie did not. So he certainly, as we know, has some situational awareness that he needs to work through and learn how to move around in the pocket and get the ball out a little bit quicker.
So that's a good point you bring up. That I think we would all agree, and Dowell Loggins said it yesterday. That was the best half of football that Norris has played in his career by far. That first half against LSU, even with like you said, the fumble and the interception. This is college football. This is a 12-game sample size. This is not the NBA where if a guy's dinged up, you just load management it, and there's 81 other games. If Lenoris is good enough that he feels like he can go, is it worth letting him start just to A, get him more reps? He's still a young quarterback too. But B, keep the momentum from what you saw from him last week? Or is that something that you just got to go, hey, if you're not 100%, I know you played well last week. I know you're going to be off again next week. It's kind of where I would say the argument is for him to play, just to paint the other side that you want him getting reps every week and you want him to try to build on what he did last week.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of drives might not be the worst idea, but you need him to be healthy for this team to have any chance at having a good season. They're going to need him, and so the last thing you want to do is take a chance at get another injury or making the current injury even worse. So, I mean, if nothing else, split the reps. Let them get a little bit of work and sit them. If ideally Carolina could go up quickly and then sit them the rest of the way, but it's certainly a fine line to walk with his health.
Yeah, I will say that's kind of the other thing too is, we, as we do every week, players, Beamer, both coordinators, all that's on GamecockScoop.com. I thought probably the single most interesting quote of the week from anybody came from Dowell Loggins yesterday, and I wrote a little bit about it. He just said that there's certain plays that just get marked off the call sheet when Robbie's in. And that's not so much on Robbie. That's not saying that he's not throwing his play under the bus, but he was just saying that, look, Norris gets most of the reps with the ones during the week. He's the starting quarterback. He's got the timing. He's got the time on task. Quarterbacks always talk about the rapport with the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs. And there's certain plays where Robbie just doesn't have the chemistry yet with those guys. You feel comfortable calling it in a game. Well, what better chance are you going to have to try to just get some of those reps in there to get a hitch route between Robbie Ashford and Mazio Bennett comfortable just from a timing standpoint than the game against Akron?
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I saw rewatching the tape, to me it seemed like LSU didn't respect certain aspects of the offense. Mm-hmm. Robbie came in. They really keyed on him when we sent receivers in motion for the possible handoff. They really didn't seem to respect that very much. So they seem to know that the passing game was going to be limited, and Robbie was more than likely going to keep his fair share of carries. And so they played to that from what I could see as far as on film there. So him being able to open up the offense a little bit, make some throws downfield, or not even downfield, but just really anything more than he's already done would go a long way.
Yeah, I think too, you saw a little bit of it on that last drive where he kind of had to push the ball just because obviously the situation. He hit the one over the middle to Jacobs. He had a bad break on a drop by Mazio on one of those plays too. Obviously, his biggest pass play was called back by a pretty dubious penalty, that OPI. I mean, I'll go ahead and say it. Like I was pretty clear on the show last week that South Carolina beat itself more than the refs beat them, and most of the calls were just stuff you got to live with. But that was the entire game that I've watched like 5 times, and I don't know what Mazio did wrong.
Yeah. The other calls, you could kind of see it. You may not agree with it, but there's some gray area there. But in that one, it's just a complete head scratcher.
Yeah. That's besides the point. But that was Robbie Ashford's best play of the day, in my opinion. Yeah. He rolls out of the pocket. He hits a receiver on the run. Campbell makes a good catch, too, on that play. So maybe you see a little bit more of that. Maybe you see – I guess the question is, like, how much – if you kind of think of this as a Venn diagram, right? Like the Sellers playbook, the Ashford playbook, how much overlap is there between these two guys? Obviously, the skill sets are kind of similar. You can do some of the same running stuff. But I'm just curious if it is – I think we both agree Ashford's going to play at some point in this game, whether that's starting or if you get up big and you pull Sellers or, rotating series like you suggested. But Robbie Ashford's going to play some Saturday. How much is the middle of that Venn diagram with this playbook is something I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is it's fairly similar. But, I mean, even last year, even though we knew Rattler was going to take most of the snaps, he and Sellers, they like different plays last year. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've heard. And the two different people, and Robbie and Lenoris are two different people. So I'm sure there's going to be certain plays that each one is a little bit more comfortable with than the other. The question is, it might make it a difficult time in practice this week, not knowing who's actually going to see the majority of snaps, even though they're the coaches and they got to call it, but they still have to see how Lenoris heals up through the rest of the week. So my guess is they'll just try to find as many of the mutually like plays as they can, and that'll be the bulk of the game plan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That kind of brings me to the next point we're going to talk about here is, okay, obviously this is not an SEC game. I get it. Every opponent causes problems. You almost lost to Old Dominion. I think you're a 4-touchdown favorite for a reason. It's your last chance to take the field before Ole Miss and Alabama come calling after the bye week. I think you got to flush the taste of last week out of your mouth for sure, just the way that game ended. What do you think South Carolina can take from this game other than a win and just staying healthy, which I think everybody would say? Like, what's the biggest, other than the quarterback stuff, I guess, too, which we just talked about, what's the biggest thing you can walk out of this game with if you're South Carolina as you turn on the Akron tape and start trying to get your team ready to play 2 top 5 opponents after Akron?
Yeah, I don't know if the spread matters that much, to be quite honest. I think in general, seeing Carolina just control the game.
Yeah.
Whether that's 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, or more, whatever it may be, I think Carolina fans just want to see this team bounce back, because in the past we've seen in other years a hangover and almost lose or even lose to teams at this level. I mean, heck, in the past we've lost to the Citadel. Wofford's given us a run. So I think the fan base really wants to see this team show that this isn't the same type of team, that they're going to take everybody seriously. They're going to come out, give full effort. Some of the technique stuff will hopefully be cleaned up. But I think more so than just a score, just controlling the game. I think that'll make everybody feel a little bit better.
I'm glad you brought up the technique stuff, because I mean, I get it. Some of it was officiated. We talked about it already. I think everybody's talked about it at some point in the last week. You still had 13 penalties last week, and definitely not all those are the refs. So Shane Beamer was very frustrated this week. He mentioned it both in person and on the SEC coaches conference call yesterday that they had 2 offsides in that game, and one of them was right before the 2-minute warning. when they told players in walkthrough and practice, hey, teams aren't going to be trying to snap it going to the 2-minute, I guess the 2-minute timeout's what it's called. Don't jump before the 2-minute play. Then on a 4th and 3 before the 2-minute play, you jump, you give LSU a free play. That was one that really stuck in its crawl. One that stuck in mind that we talked about, Caleb and I, on the Sunday show, was 3rd and 2, less than 5 minutes to go. Key play coming up, your 5th-year senior center with a false start, backs you up to 3rd and 7. You've had 5 illegal man downfield penalties in 3 games now. You've had at least one in every game. Can you get that cleaned up? No, you have. Like, I know that's part of the RPO stuff. Just sometimes the linemen don't know what's happening behind them and they get a little too far down. But can you clean that up this weekend, right? Like, I think those are maybe the kind of things. You might have some other ones, but those kind of like procedural things are what I'm looking for as much as anything out of this game.
Yeah, and defensively tackling.
Yeah, for sure. Good point.
I didn't count every missed tackle that going back through the film, but there were 12 glaring missed tackles. I mean, and there were more than that, but there were 12 glaring that we haven't seen to this point with this defense. They've been pretty sound, but they were some of the tight end stuff LSU did. Once LSU hit 1 or 2 of those runs, it opened up the tight end for them. And I mean, they scored a touchdown off of it, but they just delayed. They had the tight end blocked for a second or 2 and then released them, and we lost them completely.
Yeah, a lot of those. The LSU touchdown to start the 4th quarter was one of those, just right over the middle.
And they got a couple of first downs because we lost the tight end. It was almost like, okay, well, if he's starting off the block, then he's over a pass threat, and we just let him go. And that's things like that is just like knowing your keys, knowing your responsibility, and getting that cleaned up, because Akron does like to use a tight end a lot. And I can guarantee they're going to try some of that at some point on Saturday to see if they can get some easy first downs or maybe even a score off of it, just like LSU did.
Yeah, we're going to get into Akron in a second. One other thing, I think, just in terms of what South Carolina can take from this game, I think individually, some of the players who had a tough time last week, I give Kyle Kennard a lot of credit for coming in and doing Media Tuesday. That was tough. You could see he was frustrated, but he answered every question about. He had 3 big penalties in that game. There's no way around it. I think just for his confidence, he knows he's a great pass rusher. He's leading the country in sacks, or I think he's tied in sacks right now. But just for his sake to kind of see the ball go through the net, proverbially speaking, get a couple sacks on the board, just kind of get last week out of his mouth. You don't want to drive the stall in the red zone or in scoring range against Akron, but if you do, it'd be good to see Alex Herrera put one on the board after the way last week's game ended. I'm just trying to think. Dylan Stewart didn't have a tackle last week. I'm not worried about Dylan Stewart long term. Don't even trying to go there, but just to get him going again. I just some of these guys who had frustration last week, who Maceo Bennett had a drop late in that game. It'd be good to get him involved early, I think. I don't know if you have some other guys in mind, but I think individually, as much as anything, for what's still a pretty young team, just again seeing the ball go through the net, to use the basketball term, after the way last week's game ended.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a lot of guys that can play a whole lot better, and they will this week. I have no doubt. I mean, it's a different feel around the program this year than it has been. So no reason to believe they won't come out and look much better, regardless of who the opponent is. I think they seem locked in, and they want to show that they were the better team this past week, but doesn't always reflect on the scoreboard that way.
Yeah, so let's get into Akron a little bit. Zips coming in at 1-2, losses to Ohio State and Rutgers, which, I mean, okay, Ohio State, that's whatever. Plays Colgate last week against an FCS opponent, fall behind 17-0, but come back to win the game 31-20, get their first win of the year. It's a Joe Moorhead offense that's always going to create some challenges, create some wrinkles. I know you're an Akron guy. What are your thoughts on the Zips through 3 games and what they might bring to Williams-Brice Stadium Saturday night?
They're a team trying to improve. They're a little beat up right now in some spots as well from those the Ohio State and Rutgers. So even though they're going to have most of the team playing, they're already like mid-season basically type injury-wise, as far as not everybody fully healthy. But that game against Colgate last week, they did fall behind 17-0. The first drive, they let the quarterback scoot for 25 yards for a touchdown. Then they came right back, muffed the punt, gave up the ball inside the red zone, and allowed a score to go down 14-0. And then they shanked the punt, which allowed another field goal. So 17-0. But then they, unlike in previous years, Akron actually got it together, reeled off 28 points. And then they got plenty of yards. I mean, the quarterback went, I think, 65% completion, 45 yards and 4 touchdowns, I think it was. But the biggest thing they're trying to do this year offensively is push the ball downfield more. Joe Moorhead took over the call playing again this year. He did it in year 1, turned it over to assistant last year, and now he's taking it back over. So they're really trying to push the ball downfield. They have the speed. The teams that have speedy receiving cores have given Carolina some issues. Akron does have a couple guys that can really get up and go. So I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina gave up a couple of explosives somewhere throughout the game. I mean, Akron hit them on Ohio State and Rutgers. So there's nothing that makes me think they can't hit a couple on South Carolina as well. That doesn't mean they're going to consistently score. That's not at all what I'm saying. But they do have some guys that can get up and go. Defensively, they're very stout on the defensive line and that linebacker. In the secondary, Joey Hunter, a former South Carolina player, starting at corner. And the safeties have been playing really well too. Where Akron has struggled is just getting worn down. I mean, it was a 17 to
3 in the third at Ohio State. Yeah, Shane brought that up this week.
Yeah, and then against Rutgers, it actually was I think it's 14-7, and then the wheels kind of fell off at the end of the first half against Rutgers with, I think, less than 2 minutes left. And then Rutgers just ran the ball down their throat the rest of the way. So I'm sure South Carolina is going to bust some big plays. I mean, South Carolina's built to run the ball kind of like Rutgers, but Akron is just coming in here hoping to get better, get a paycheck, stay healthy, and go into conference play and do a little something. So they had the best team they've had under Moorhead, but it's not going to be good enough to hang with South Carolina for 4 quarters.
I think the main question I think I have for Akron, this is something Shane Beamer brought up Tuesday and Clayton White talked about a little bit yesterday, is the 2 quarterback offense, right? How much of that is Finley going in and out with Bullock? How much of that is the 2 on the field together from what you've seen? What is that actually going to try to present South Carolina's defense just from a challenge standpoint with what Moorhead does with those 2 guys?
Yeah, so for the most part, Finley stays on the field.
Okay.
Taj Bullock is the one that comes in, and they'll line him up at tight end, at receiver, at running back, up back. Like they move him all around. And he is a good athlete. I mean, he signed out of high school with Virginia Tech. He was there for a couple of years. He didn't get a whole lot of game experience, but he did see the field some. And so he's really used as, I mean, it's gadget type of plays, yeah. but you're actually seeing more teams do that this year. In fact, I've seen a couple other teams already do that. So it's already starting to leak across college football. But he hasn't thrown the ball out of that much yet. I'm sure that he's going to. I mean, he's got a big arm, that's for sure. But where Bullock has struggled is just at being a full-time starting quarterback. But Ben Finley, he's played in big games before. He out-dueled, I think it was Drake May at North Carolina when Finley was at North Carolina State. He played some games at Cal. So he's still coming into his own. But the big concern is that, I mean, South Carolina has one of the best pass rushing defenses in the SEC this year. And that offensive line for Akron is still growing. And this is going to be a horrendous matchup for them. They have a lot of young guys on that line, and they still have plenty of work to do. And they'll be fine down the road. But this is just, it's going to be a bad matchup.
Where would you set an over/under at South Carolina sacks and tackles for loss on Saturday night?
I don't know. It's going to be, I would say at bare minimum 5 sacks.
Okay.
I mean, and honestly, Akron's done fine in their matchups earlier this year when they're not facing a blitz. But when the blitzes start coming and those twists start happening, that's where that O-line, and again, they're young, just gets all kinds of thrown off. And so I don't think South Carolina is even going to need to bring many blitzes this game. And so because of that, you're going to have that many guys on the back end and coverage, which is going to make it more difficult for Akron to hit anything deep. But South Carolina's pretty much going to have their way on the defensive side of the ball. My question is, what is our offense going to look like? If Sellers isn't going to play, Akron's good enough to give South Carolina problems right now, simply because we don't have I don't want to say viable quarterback, but we don't have a backup quarterback that we've seen do a whole lot yet. So they could actually cause Carolina some issues for part of the game until that's settled. But I don't think Akron can hang in again for a full 4 quarters and stop a running back like Rocket Sanders. I mean, Joe Moorhead even made a joke in suggesting Beamer sit Rocket Sanders this week. Get him ready for Ole Miss. So he knows what he's up against.
I know obviously Joe Moorhead's joking there, and you're joking there as well. I did have that as a question though for this week. Rocket Sanders has 56 out of the 67 carries for South Carolina running backs this season. I get it. He's here for a reason. You're not bringing Rocket Sanders here to pass block or whatever. Like, that's still 84%, which is a lot for a first running back especially coming off an injury, although he obviously looks healthy. Is this the week Oscar Adderley gets it moving? Is this the week Eugene McDowell gets it moving? Like, it's kind of feels like now or never, right? Like, if you can't get him some reps in this game and some positive momentum in this game, especially going into a bye week where you're going to have 2 weeks kind of evaluate things, like, I don't think it's sustainable for Rocket to take 84% of the carries all year, but you kind of don't have a choice right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I think this would be the game you get some of your backups some time at running back. Rocket is clearly carrying the load, and he can do everything. I mean, he's great pass blocking, catches ball out the backfield. We know what he can do carrying the ball. But we haven't even seen the other backs much yet.
11 carries in 3 games total.
Yeah. So the last time we saw them do anything was during the spring. So, because most of the practices were closed in the fall. So it would be nice to see those guys get out there, get some action, prove that they're ready to go. I mean, Juju, after the lightning strike in
Old Dominion.
Old Dominion. Like we've hardly even seen him either. And we know he can do some things. So it's a little surprising that the other guys haven't gotten much action at all yet.
Yeah, I would say that's one of my key points this week. We haven't talked about the rest of the injury stuff, and we don't really know because there is no injury report for non-SEC games. But Jared Brown got banged up in the 3rd quarter against LSU, didn't return. TJ Sanders, same deal. Beamer seemed bullish that both those guys would be fine long term, said they both practiced Tuesday. If they sit, or if they're limited, which I think is reasonable to expect against Akron. Again, the rest of this wide receiver room, right? We saw a lot more reps to Dale Von Campbell after Big Jared Brown went down. Nick Barrett played, I think, for the first time all year on the D-line. I saw him on that goal line stand series after TJ Sanders went down. You can start to get some more bodies in there, some more depth. I think you saw at the end of the Kentucky game, you were able to empty the bench really a lot. Mo Kaba and, Fred Johnson playing linebacker, David Busey at safety. That's the other thing I'm looking for. If you can put Akron away early, if you have a 3-4 score lead in the 3rd quarter, that you're going to be able to get some guys some reps that you just don't see. I mean, really, think about it this way too. Like, if Lenoris doesn't play and Robbie handles business, you're up 3-4 scores. Dante Reno debut, Davis Bevel. Like, could you see them in the 4th quarter even? Like,
yeah, I do wonder. Davis Bevel gets a shot because he's done well at Oklahoma. If he comes in and can be that steady presence at quarterback, that's something I'd like to see. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully Carolina handles business and gets some other guys in. The other concern that we came into the season with is who do we have at the, you mentioned some of the guys at safety, but what do we have back there? If Eamon Warry and DQ Smith go down,
Peyton Williams last week after Eamon Warry took a shot late, but Eamon Warry seemed fine. He did media this week.
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot of depth, at least proven depth back there, I should say. So this would be a prime opportunity to get some of those guys some work because Eamon Warry and DQ Smith, they can't play every snap of the whole season. It's just not liable. So, this would be a great game to get some depth in there for sure.
Yeah, and that sort of brings it towards the end of the Akron discussion. But you wake up Sunday morning, coffee, watching highlights from the day before, whatever. What did South Carolina do the night before that would make you more confident about the rest of the season? Just point blank. I know it's Akron, but that's the whole point. Like, is there anything they can do in this game that would increase how you feel about the rest of the season? Or is this just a handling business and not getting hurt game?
I think that's, for me at least, that's more of what it is, right? Handle your business, stay healthy, ideally get some of your depth in there and get some play. Again, I don't care too much what the final score is. I don't care the spread. I just want these guys to have a good bounce back, show they're dialed in and they play physically. I mean, they played physically all year. So want to continue to see that happen. And it'd be nice to see a game where they control it and don't have to count on so many turnovers.
That's a good point too.
Favor. So that's what I would like to see is, even if we don't get the turnovers, do we get sustained drives that lead to points? I don't want to see sustained drives that don't lead to anything, because I mean, what yards don't mean much, points do. So that's what's gonna win the game. So it'd be nice to see us just control the action.
Yeah, one other thing for me, it's kind of small, but I think it could be big later in the year, is you've had the ball with between a minute and a half to go in the first half in all three games. You haven't gotten points on any of those three drives. Old Dominion, you go 3 and out. You weren't really being aggressive there, but you still couldn't move the chains on the running plays. Kentucky, Lenoris throws the pick that leads to Kentucky's second field goal. Last week, obviously, Lenoris takes a sack and field goal range. That's what got him hurt. Can you get the ball back with 2 minutes in the first half and score? I know it sounds small. I know I'm serious, though. Like, you're 0 for 3 on that this year. Like, that matters. And it's going to matter more in other games. That's a very small thing that I'm looking for this week, too, that if they could put up some points right before halftime. Obviously, the game script has to work that way. You have to actually have the ball to end the half, but if there's a chance to do that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Just sustain control, moving guys off the ball, pass protecting well, just looking the way an SEC team should look against Akron. I think there's not really, like you said, a tangible definition, but just looking the way you should look.
Yeah. Pass the eyeball test. Like that's
eyeball. You got to pass the eye test this weekend. That being said, we are in the predictions business. Do you have a score prediction for this game?
So because I don't know who's going to be.
That's the problem. We're recording this before a quarterback. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I could.
You want to make a Robbie pick and a Lenoris pick?
Yeah, let's do that. So I think if Lenoris plays the majority of the game, I think Carolina does cover the spread. Probably, I mean, we haven't proven though offensively we can put up a whole lot of points as of yet, so that makes it difficult too. But maybe this doesn't cover the spread, but I don't know, 35-17 Carolina. But with Robbie in the game, maybe more like, I don't know, maybe more, probably take at least a touchdown off, 28-17,
That'd be a lot closer than anybody wants with that. I think that would cause some panic stations going into the bye week. But I see what you're saying.
The thing is, I think the defense is going to continue to cause turnovers. They're continue to get in the backfield. They're going to continue to get the offense good field position. And I think that's where the scoring opportunities are going to come from. So it could be a lot more than that. But if Akron does have a good punter, and if he's able to flip the field position consistently and cause us to make, 80-yard drives, the chances of scoring, at least scoring touchdowns, are much lower. So there's so many ifs that go on with this, it's hard for me to make a prediction. I feel much better a healthy Sellers is running the
Sure.
show, but yeah, sorry, I don't have a good answer for you.
I'm a little more confident than you, especially in this defense. I think
Yeah.
I think 17's too many points for Akron. I think this defense comes out angry. They come out frustrated about last week. Kyle Kennard specifically come out, make some plays early, dominate the line of scrimmage, like you said. I'll say with Sellers, you win the game 38-7. Without Sellers, maybe 31-7. Like I think you just control the game up front, and it's not going to get super exciting, but I think you just handle it. You want to talk about some of the rest of the country, or you got to get out of here?
Yeah.
All right, Caleb and I every week, and I'm pulling it up now, just kind of go through the games we have on staff picks before the article actually publishes. I'm pulling up our staff picks now. I am way underwater against the spread this year, although I'm still hanging in there on the overalls. But good Lord, it's the worst I've ever done. Wow, I didn't even realize it was that bad, so I just opened it. You're I think we're all underwater against the spread this year, except Caleb. But oh no, actually, guest picker is over too. But all right, we'll start with Friday night. Illinois at Nebraska, 2 3-0 teams in the Big Ten. Nebraska is favored by 8.5. What you thinking?
So, I mean, you know that I follow Brett Bielema and like the job. It's the very similar timeline there and how the program's been built with Beamer and Bielema. But I actually like Illinois here. They have a very strong defense. They have the quarterback has been extremely efficient. I think they played a much more difficult schedule so far than Nebraska. I don't think Nebraska's played it. I don't think Colorado's a good team, so I just don't think that's a great win. And so I'm actually picking Illinois, even though it is tough to go away and get a win. That's who I'm going with here. So deep, stable running backs as well.
Yep.
Big offensive line. I think Matt Rule's done a phenomenal job and will continue to do so, but I just don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah, I picked Nebraska to win, but not cover. I agree with what you said on Illinois' defense, running the ball, can kind of control the game. I just think Nebraska's a little bit better overall, and better at quarterback too, can make some plays playing at home as well. One team without a quarterback is NC State. Grayson McCall is out this weekend as NC State is at Clemson. Wolfpack 17-point dogs in Clemson with a backup quarterback. What you thinking there?
Yeah, I think I took Clemson.
You did, yeah.
Yeah. Even though Clemson doesn't have a great quarterback either, at least as what he's shown so far, I think Clemson's just going to overwhelm. I don't think NC State's even close to what they were last year. So I suspect Clemson's going to overwhelm them.
I don't either. I did pick NC State to cover just because that game's weird sometimes. And I don't know. I still don't think Clemson's offense is amazing. But you're right. Without Grayson McCall, that could get out of hand pretty quickly. Another game in state, speaking of Grayson McCall, his former team, Coastal Carolina, undefeated, 3-point dogs at home against Virginia. This is kind of a sneaky, fun game on the afternoon slate.
Yeah, I went with Coastal.
Same.
I think they're stronger than a lot of people realize, which honestly is surprising to me. I wasn't expecting them to be that good this year, but they seem to be really firing on all cylinders. I don't think Virginia is that good, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't either.
So I think they've just benefited from the schedule they played so far. So yeah, I went with Coastal.
Yeah, you're giving me points with the better team playing at home. That's kind of my line of thinking there. So I took Coastal as well. Moving into the 3:30 window, that classic historic Big Ten rivalry, Southern Cal at Michigan. Southern Cal favored by 6. Michigan made a quarterback change this week. What you thinking for the game at the Big House?
I took Southern Cal, but I don't feel confident. I don't think either one of these teams are great. I think Michigan is struggling to find their identity this year, for like a better term there. Southern Cal, I think they were lucky to catch LSU in week 1. I think LSU is a much better team than Southern Cal, but again, the better team doesn't always win. And so I picked Southern Cal just because I think they have things a little more figured out than Michigan does, but I'm not confident in that.
I picked Southern Cal to win and cover. You've got Michigan here still covering. I just don't think Michigan. I think Michigan's just kind of broken on offense right now. I mean, the week 4 quarterback change is never a good sign when you've played 3 games and you're still not really sure and you're kind of bouncing back and forth. If nothing else, I know Miller Moss is pretty good. And I think Southern Cal's going to be able to go in there and win by at least 6. Louisville at home, still undefeated, playing Georgia Tech. Kind of hard to figure out Georgia Tech right now. You beat Florida State. That has not aged as well. You lose a 3-point game to Syracuse, but they are 3-1. Georgia Tech is getting 10 points at Louisville. And you picked Georgia Tech outright, I see here.
Yeah. So my thinking behind that is I just like the way Georgia Tech runs the ball and controls it.
For sure.
So if they can, my thinking is they get up by a touchdown and they kind of control it from there out. The defense is solid. Now Louisville's a good team though. I think Georgia Tech has enough to pull it out. But if Georgia Tech gets behind, that could actually run away in Louisville's favor.
That's kind of what I was thinking. If Louisville gets up first, forces Georgia Tech to pass the ball, playing at home. I think Louisville's got a pretty good defense too. That's just a good football team. Not that should really come as a surprise, Brom there, but that's a good team. Maybe the game of the day, at least from a rankings perspective, it is. But Utah at Oklahoma State, we still don't know I think Cam Rising is going to play. It was question. I feel like every week there's a Cam Rising question. Either way, Utah at Oklahoma State, Okie State favored by 2.5 at home. 2 really good defenses here, at least on paper. What do you think?
I just went with home team.
So it's a hard one to call.
Yeah. So
I picked Utah. I might change that between now and article publishing if I find out more about Cam Rising's health. I still can't quite get out of my head that Okie State should have lost to Arkansas.
Yeah.
But maybe that was an off day, and Okie State's still pretty tough at home. A couple SEC games for you now. Arkansas, 3.5-point dogs at Auburn. Who the hell knows what's going to happen there with either team? I picked Auburn at home. I have no read on either team.
I think I went with Arkansas there, didn't I?
I'm checking now. You did. You took the Hogs on the road to win outright.
That was a toss. Like I don't know what to think of either one of those teams. So I mean, if I get that one, it's pure stroke of luck. Like I have no idea.
Maybe the 2 most confusing teams in the SEC right now. Honestly, I have no idea what to make. Auburn's got the quarterback mess and looked a little better last week, but still not great. And Arkansas, okay, you put up 600 however many yards against Oklahoma State, but you lose and you wobble against UAB last week. I don't know. I really don't. The game day game this week, College Game Day in Norman. It's Oklahoma's first ever SEC game. It is the return of Josh Heupel to Norman. Vols favored by 7.5 at OU. What you thinking in prime time?
I Tennessee. I mean, they're a really good team.
Yeah.
And I not been impressed by Oklahoma's offense at all. And so I think Tennessee's just they got too much for them.
I'm really out on OU's offensive line specifically. They've looked terrible through. I think PFF has them as the second lowest Power 4 offensive line in the country.
Yeah.
I think James Pierce Jr. has a big day. Tennessee goes there and wins, puts up some points early, forces Oklahoma into the drop back pass. Honestly, that's the one. I think I said this to Caleb last week. That's the one game on the schedule that before the season started, I thought was unwinnable for South Carolina that I've reevaluated. That I think the way OU's O-line's playing, it obviously that game's in 4 weeks. Guys could be hurt, things could be different by then. But the way OU's offensive line's playing right now, that's a pretty big mismatch for South Carolina. And you can go there if you find some offense. What is that? Week 8, play well, win that game. But we'll talk about that in a month. Yeah. Last one on the board here. It's a late game. It's fun. I think it starts at like 10:30. Kansas State favored by 7 at BYU.
I like Kansas State. Isn't that who I chose there?
You took KSU, but BYU to cover the 7 or to stay within 7.
Yeah. Again, going on the road, especially in certain environments, can be tough. But I think Kansas State's the better team. But I don't know. So certain travel conditions can make it a little wonky. So that's why I went that way.
Yeah, I'm just in on Kansas State. I mean, they crumpled up Arizona last week. They beat a pretty good Tulane team the week before. I just think Chris Kleiman's a really good football coach, and honestly, I would be surprised if K-State won the Big 12 and got in the playoff. That's going to wrap us up this week on the GamecockScoop.com podcast. Appreciate you joining me, Perry. We'll have staff picks article tomorrow, my final preview of the game, an injury update from Shane Beamer tonight, from Carolina calls we posted, and obviously all the content that comes with the game on Saturday. So subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate it, and we'll see you Sunday morning after the game.